Late in the 15th century, the focus was on choral music. Polyphonic works written for several singers per voice part instead of for solo voices. And Flanders, an area within the Duchy of Burgundy, became the center of musical activity. With Johannes Ockeghem, a powerfully influential composer and teacher of the time, as its pioneer, the new Flemish style spread quickly. Renaissance composers throughout Europe strove for a new ideal in sound. The ideal was represented by a chorus divided into 4 equally important voice parts: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, with little or no instrumental accompaniment. The voice parts wove among one another, with no one voice predominating. Rhythm was fluid and free, tonality distinct. The expressive effect had an immediate impact on listeners. The music was smooth, homogeneous, spiritual rather than personal, creating a mystical or otherworldly effect appropriate to sacred themes. The Latin Mass, an ideal vehicle for the Flemish style, soon became the chief musical form. Composers wrote hundreds of different settings of the Mass, often building them around a particular plain chant melody, the cantus firmus, as a means of creating unity. Although sometimes secular, even vulgar tunes were used as cantus firmi. But these were so enmeshed in the musical fabric that they were recognized only by other musicians, following a long-standing tradition of compositional in-jokes.
While Flemish composers were refining their style, a cultural revolution was taking place in Italy. A whole new philosophy called humanism, a concern with the quality of life on earth, was developing hand in hand with unprecedented prosperity. The church lost its monopoly over the arts as more private individuals began supporting artists and musicians, even posing for sculptures and paintings. All the arts were stimulated by this explosion in ideas as well as opportunities. But Italians had not reached the same level of sophistication in music as in the other arts, so the most brilliant Flemish musicians and composers were imported to serve and to teach in the Italian courts. The development of printing and then of movable type simplified music publication. Without each note having to be hand-copied, music could be sold and performed more widely than ever before. How-to manuals for amateur musicians were published along with the more traditional scholarly texts. Music now enjoyed greater prestige than ever before, and contemporary music was the most popular of all.
The Flemish composer, Josquin des Prez, was considered the greatest composer of all. Regarded even today among the supreme masters, he served in the Italian and French courts as well as in the papal chapel. Josquin's music was published widely and known throughout Europe. Although he wrote masses in the Flemish style, he focused on the motet, which by the year 1500 had changed since Machaut used the form more than a century earlier. Shorter and more flexible than the Mass, the motet allowed the composer greater opportunity to invent and experiment. Josquin was a master of imitative counterpoint, a characteristic feature of Renaissance polyphony. In imitative counterpoint, various musical lines enter one after the other, each starting with the same pattern of notes, so that the later entrances appear to be imitating the first. Because Josquin's music was less ornate than that of his predecessors, it more effectively reflected the images and feelings suggested by the words. Its simplicity also underlined its sense of tonal clarity. Josquin's polyphony suggests a spiritual conversation among equal participants. Although the voices seem to move independently, they are delicately balanced to maintain fluid continuity until the music settles into a cadence or temporary resting point. During the same